All right. Thank you all for being with us today for the CARW Thought Leadership Series. This is the third of our 4 programs in the Thought Leadership Series, The Changing Retail Landscape. We have one more program next week, Wednesday at 1 o'clock, featuring Noah Williams from the University of Wisconsin. Programs like this are not possible without gracious sponsors. And today, we want to recognize and thank our series presenting sponsor, Landmark Credit Union.
Landmark Credit Union is honored to be the presenting sponsor for CAR's new Thought Leadership Series. Today, all CAR members, including brokers and affiliates, are affected by COVID-19. This challenge, like all previous ones, presents new realities and opportunities. For Landmark, we faced one reality that business lending would be managed remotely, but an opportunity to increase the use of digital signatures and contactless closings. Across the company, several innovations created to serve members had a positive outcome and will remain as permanent options. I am excited to hear about more creative ideas presented in the Thought Leadership Series from companies, industry experts, and economic analysts. I hope this series provides all of you with new opportunities that can be derived from today's reality.
We're also grateful to our 2020 CARW annual sponsors listed on this screen. We would not be successful without them, and we are, again, very thankful. So on with the program. I am very excited to moderate today's program with our presenter, and we're going to dive right in. The format today is going to be about 35 minutes of my asking questions of our presenter, and then we want to hear from you. So use the chat function, and I'll be able to see those questions as they come in. You can also use the Q&A icon on your reader bar, and I'll make sure that I get those questions. And if we don't answer them in the 45 minutes that the total program is allotted, I'll make sure to try to follow up with you. Again, we'll go until about 1:45 today. So without further ado, I want to present our presenter today, Mr. Dan Klein. He is an accomplished writer, editor, and media personality for The Motley Fool. He regularly appears on Market Foolery, Industry Focus, and hosts multiple hours on the company's live video service for members. He previously worked for Microsoft on its finance app and the Boston Globe, where he wrote for the paper and ran the Boston.com business desk. So thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And it sounds good when you write your own bio. That is a flattering picture of my career. So yeah, I've been a Motley Fool for about 6 years, helping the world make better investment decisions. So work I am really, really proud of.
And so where are you presenting today from? It looks
yeah, so I'm in a really funky co-working space in West Palm Beach. It is a very large space. There's only a handful of people here, so we are all properly socially distanced. But because I'm broadcasting every day and my wife is working from home most of the time, her office just partially reopened. She can go in a couple days a week with very strict rules. I've actually been exiled to my office for most of the day. Working on building a studio here right now, sort of a funky wood vibe behind me, but happy to not be stuck in the house. We live downtown, so we have a relatively small condo with a 16-year-old and my wife at home, and 2 cats. So a little bit of separation is a good thing.
Okay, well, very good. Well, we're going to dive right in. And again, today's focus is going to be the kind of the changing landscape of retail, although I know you can bring in lots of different elements with that. So the first question I have, if you were to be doing this presentation in January, so January of 2020 versus today, how would this presentation be different?
Well, there's been a lot of acceleration. I think if you had asked me in January, would JCPenney go bankrupt? I still would have said yes. I just would have looked at the numbers and said, like, they've got like 8 months, they got 10 months. Everything that has happened for the most part is what would have happened anyway. Now, are there some exceptions? Yeah. Jill Saltow, the CEO of JCPenney, has excellent ideas, and maybe with more runway, if she could have shown that some of her ideas would work, maybe they could have gotten money and avoided bankruptcy. Maybe. A company like Macys, which wasn't in trouble, is in, I'm not going to say trouble, they're in a good financial position, but how quickly they reopen is going to be really important because they are eating up cash that they need to make transformation. Most of the companies that aren't doing well, you could have predicted it 8 years ago. Remember when Best Buy was really struggling and they were in a situation, they were being a showroom for Amazon. People would come in, they would use all the resources at a Best Buy, and then they would buy on their phone or go home and buy. Best Buy is the one company that said, what is going wrong here? They brought in a CEO from outside the industry, Hubert Joly, who is now the chairman. They brought him in and he said, well, these are all the things we're doing wrong. We're paying people based on commission. Our prices are too high. We have to change all of this. We have to take cost out of this. We have to offer a service. Every retailer that didn't do that, they weren't doing it in January. There were not, I always joke, but Eddie Lampert of Sears at every quarterly earnings call would talk about transformation. They didn't make any actual transformation. My prediction for Sears is he's going to be in the last Sears store, closing it down aisle by aisle, telling you how great his turnaround efforts are going. Bad companies with bad management have failed. That doesn't mean locally you're losing some great companies because they don't have the backstop. They don't have the ability to go to the market and borrow money. They don't necessarily, hold their own real estate. And sometimes the landlord might go, geesh, this would be better as something else. But probably not the case in too many cases right now. But big companies have more leeway. There are some really good small companies that probably got eaten up by this, but not, Forever 21 wasn't doing that well. The Gap was really struggling before this because I haven't been in a Gap intentionally since like 1994 because they stopped speaking to me at some point. And are there brands that do? Of course there are. I believe very strongly in the mall, which is something we'll absolutely talk about later. I don't buy any of these stories that young people don't still like to go to the mall. When we're in normal times, go to any mall. And that's just simply not true. But there were a lot of brands, that were just, you have to figure out how to survive when you're no longer fashionable. Some companies like say Izod, they go in and out of popularity, but they have a core audience that they're speaking to that keeps them afloat. That's not necessarily true for most of these brands that are dying. And then you have brands caught in the middle. Kohls is one where Kohls has really dropped the ball in terms of owned and operated brands standing out, and Target has taken up some of that slack. If you told me a year ago I'd consider buying a shirt at Target that wasn't for like working out or going to the pool, I'd tell you you're crazy. But Target has really built out some brands where it used to be you go to Target, you'd buy their sport coat, and everyone would know you bought the Target sport coat because they only had one. Now they have really interesting products and partnerships. They had a short-term partnership with Vineyard Vines, which is super collectible. They have Chip and Joanna Gaines, household goods, but really interesting stuff. And when you go to Kohls, you're like, what is Croft and Barrow? Like, I've never heard of this brand before. What apartment? Not like they haven't done the job. And Kohls is probably going to be fine. I know it's a locally based company, but a lot of companies have flailed in their efforts to change. People always talked about, Toys R Us was killed by Amazon. Toys R Us was killed by incompetence. It was a $6 billion leverage buyout. I used to run a giant toy store, a very successful store, still exists in Connecticut, Time Machine Hobby, a multi-million-dollar store. My store was a destination, still is a destination. People came to see the trains. People came because we had, mommy reading time during the day. We had active people playing Pokemon and Magic. Well, Toys R Us could have done any of those things, but one, they lacked the vision, and two, they didn't have any money because all of their money went into servicing their debt. That has been the case. JCPenney, this all started when they hired Ron Johnson, who was from Apple, and he said, hey, customers, everything you like about JCPenney, we're not going to do that anymore. You can't do that. Change has to be gradual. Change has to be what people want. And you have to look and see what's working. When we talked earlier, I mentioned you don't have to be the leader. Starbucks has been an absolute leader in terms of digital adoption. Mobile order and pay, that has obviously paid off for them in the pandemic. Dunkin' Donuts didn't try to reinvent the wheel. They just went like, hey, we'll do what they did. Like, that works. And generally, that strategy works. So, if you're Macy's, what should you be looking at? Look at Best Buy. Look at what works. Look at the loyalty people have to an Untuckit or other brands like that are emerging brands. Maybe call Warby Parker up and see if they want to set up some stores in some of your J.C. Penney's. There's a lot of things that can be done, and there's just a lot of bad management out there.
Well, one thing that you mentioned that was interesting, and you're positioning a Target and a Kohls and a Macy's and a Best Buy. You've got kind of two things going on there. Both of them. So let's put it this way: Kohls and Macy's were not open during the COVID-19 and the pandemic, and arguably a Target and a Best Buy were. And so that was, I know that you kind of said there was an inevitability that a Kohls and a Macy's may have struggled, but how are they looking at now being able to reopen as that opportunity? Are they looking at the real estate differently? Are they looking at omni-channel partnerships? What's going on there?
So I'll give both of those companies credit in that they've been actively trying to change their future. That Kohls and Macy's, like, I don't love the Amazon returns in Macy's. To me, that takes something that should be pretty simple, and you now have to walk through a Kohls. But they've said it's working, so I'll take them at their value. They've been doing things at Kohls like store within a store concept. They've been trying to go more full on omni-channel. The results have been muddied, but if you had to ask me, will Macy's and Kohls make it? I will say they probably will. Where the pandemic hurt them is they were both in relatively strong financial positions, and they lost a quarter. Like, Best Buy was actually closed, but because Best Buy sold things you needed, they did about 70% of their volume in curbside pickup and delivery because we needed laptops, we needed desks. There was no real easy way for Kohls to pivot to be necessary. They didn't have the supply chains to be like, now we're a grocery store, which like someone like Ollie's did. Ollie's Bargain Outlet, which is a wonderful business. They were able to say, like, you know what, we sell K-Cups, we have some of these connections. Can we get ramen noodles? Can we get other things people want? And they're a bad company for reporting results, so I have no idea how well that worked. They don't really say anything except for their quarterlies. But Kohls and Macy's were in weird positions because we didn't need a lot of I didn't need a lot of new suits. I didn't need, maybe we needed more socks and pajamas and things like that. And they probably, the CEO of Walmart came out and said, we're selling a lot more tops than bottoms, which is definitely a Zoom related function. And I'm not the person exactly to speak here because I follow the Fred Flintstone approach. I have 30 of this shirt and 20 of a similar black button down for when I'm wearing jeans instead of shorts. So I am not fashion driven. That said, I don't want to sound like I'm super negative on Macy's and Kohls because those do appear to be companies that are trying really hard to pivot, to go to more omni-channel, to figure out what customers want online and what they want in store. And we're going to start to see some revolutions in, you go to a store and the store might not even stock the inventory. It might be more of a restoration hardware model where you go in and they're using virtual techniques to show you the stuff, and then it'll be at your house by the time you get home, using like a Shipt or somebody like that. I think you're going to see different models. You might see Kohls devote less and less floor space to merchandise and more to back-end fulfillment. And, in some cases, they're giving up some of their space for Aldi, which is a good co-located business. Figuring out that balance is going to be hard because we talked about Target before. Target has succeeded with owned and operated brands because they have stores. Amazon has not been able to do that. Amazon has like 5 different men's and women athleisure brands. I have no idea what they are. I have no idea what they look like, but I can tell you that I've bought the shirt at Target that's basically Under Armour, but they can't call it Under Armour, and it's like a third the price because it's physically there and I could see what it looks like. I would be stunned, and this should get all the commercial realtors excited. I would be stunned if Amazon doesn't roll out some sort of store format to show off its stuff because, everyone knows they're launching a grocery chain because they have those supply lines. It's going to help them with their delivery. It's going to help them have a cheap counterpoint to Whole Foods. But I'd be really shocked if you didn't get some sort of Amazon owned and operated mall kiosk or store of some sort, especially in this incredibly favorable rental market for a company like Amazon that has a lot of leverage when it comes to, asking for space.
Yeah, no, and great point. And we just saw recent confirmation of a former warehouse space in in our city that was converted or will be converted to Amazon warehouse. It's actually in a perfect position to potentially be part of kind of that retail, if they were to do some sort of storefront. But I want to ask you two things about what you just said. How will companies now think about their real estate? I mean, the things that you talked about in those two examples, when you said more back end or more fulfillment space, none of that had to do with what's going on with the pandemic and social distancing and this event. It all had to do with the changes that were caused by it. Can you speak to what you're hearing from a Macys that may or may not own or lease their real estate in a mall, or a Kohls that may anchor a shopping center? What are you seeing there? And even if they're not those brands.
So in general, there's less need for store real estate. Now that doesn't mean Macys is closing some stores, but Macys is largely closing stores that were break even or money losing. So the Macys, and I point over here, but the Macys about a mile from me in downtown West Palm Beach was kind of an odd duck Macys. It was a little bit small, it was really convenient for me because I walked by there. So, you need a pair of socks, you could just walk in and get it. It was a break-even store that didn't have the space to put in bedding and some of the other material that can be very high margin and drive them. So that one was closed just because it didn't make a lot of sense to operate it. In other cases, they're closing in C-level malls where the traffic's just not there. Like I often say, if you go to a mall and there is a local restaurant in the food court that you've never heard of, I don't mean like a famous local restaurant that has like an outpost. I mean, it's just like someone set up a shop. That is not a great sign, and it means traffic at Macys. Like if you go in and there's like a store with no name that sells prom dresses, even when it's not prom season, bad sign in a mall. Those Macys are going to be in trouble. Those Macys are going to close. And the existing Macys are going to do things like embrace having off-price sections, which is something they've done really, really well. When we had a Macys here, I liked going in, and I am not a shopper. I liked going in and just like browsing through the t-shirts and being like, oh, okay, I can buy a t-shirt with Pikachu on it for $6. Like, I'll do that. And I did do that. But, they're going to fulfill more orders from stores. I think that model absolutely works. I think you're also going to see some things like, one of the things Best Buy has done is they've gone to Microsoft and Apple and other partners and said, hey, come into our stores, set up a section. I think more people are going to do that model, and that could be a really clever model. JCPenney's talked about yoga studios. You know what we don't have enough of as a country? Yoga studios. We need a lot more of them. The ones we have tend to be really small. They're very, very expensive. It's not democratic. I went to a lovely one when I lived in Connecticut, so West Hartford Yoga is absolutely a shining star example. Most are not like that. But there's a salon in a JCPenney. It's not maybe the upscale salon you'd want in a Macys, but there's a lot of things you could integrate. It's always amazed me, for example, that Barnes & Noble doesn't offer music lessons. There's nothing but endless space at Barnes & Noble to put in sound booths. There's personnel to do the booking. They already have the real estate. They already sell sheet music. And mom and dad would have something to do while their kid is playing, as opposed to sitting out in front of the music store. I have made this suggestion publicly 1,000 times, hoping they will take me up on it, because it just makes sense. I don't want Barnes & Noble to go out of business. I like books. I like browsing through books. And that has been a struggling company for a really long time because they can't get out of their own way. They tried to sell toys and didn't hire anybody who understood toys. And this is an example that's a mistake that's being made over and over. And I'll liken it back to JCPenney. JCPenney brought in appliances. Well, would you go to Sears to buy an appliance where there's a guy who's worked there for 30 years selling appliances? Or would you go into JCPenney where someone who yesterday was in Junior Mrs. Is now selling you a refrigerator? You walked into a Barnes & Noble and you would say, hey, why should I buy this $100 Ticket to Ride, which is a board game that's fun and expensive, that I could sell you all day at the toy store when I used to run? They wouldn't know the answer. They wouldn't be able to explain to you why that game is better than Monopoly for $20. That type of thinking, I think, is going to fundamentally change, where companies are going to realize, like, and I mentioned Warby Parker before. You walk into a Warby Parker, they know how to sell you eyeglasses. They're really good at it. They can find you a pair that's flattering. You walk into a Stanton Optical, their entire pitch is price. They will sell you whatever you want, even if you look terrible. I know this because I bought glasses without my wife, who said absolutely not. And I have never worn those glasses ever again. And I've never bought glasses without taking my wife. So, you know, a lot of transformation. But as we said before, all of this was a problem in January, and it was just sped up by the pandemic. Restaurants should have been doing a better job with delivery before this. You know, I would argue that all the restaurant delivery services are bad ideas. None of them make any money. You're going to see things. I'll tie it back to commercial real estate. Ghost kitchens. That is going to be an absolute growth area where it might be a closed restaurant that you're going to lease out, and they're not going to open for customers. They're going to be a breakfast restaurant in the morning, a sandwich restaurant in the afternoon, catering to local businesses, and they're going to be a Thai restaurant at night selling dinner. And people are going to go, hey, I should go to that Thai place. It's great. And they're never going to be able to find it because it's not actually a restaurant. That type of trend, doing, you know, micro warehousing and micro fulfillment for local brands, for smaller brands, that's going to happen. Not everyone could run, and you know, these Amazon warehouses look like a college campus. They are community changing when one comes in. It's a ton of well-paying, albeit very, very hard jobs from everything I've been told. But people move to areas because of that. You get your Amazon stuff faster when they put an Amazon warehouse in. We have one near our other house in the Orlando area, and I get Amazon orders next day all the time. Here in West Palm Beach, it's like 50-50. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to happen faster, but it's going to be painful. Stores that would have taken, you know, Pier 1 would have sputtered on for another 8 months maybe. But they just, Bed Bath & Beyond was in real trouble before this. They're going to struggle. I do think you're going to see malls invest in some of these stores, just like Simon Property Group in Brookfield bought part of Forever 21 to keep them afloat. If the Sycamore Partners JCPenney deal doesn't happen, they might put money, or they might outright buy JCPenney, because you know what your mall doesn't need to lose right now? An anchor store. Like, especially a good mall. Like, we have a really nice, the mall at Wellington Green's an upscale, I think it's a Simon mall, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And JCPenney is the most prominent store in that mall based on where it is. If that goes out, they might add 10 stores this year. They might add a Third Love, a Warby Parker, a Casper Mattress, and Untuck It, because it's that level of mall. But those stores don't fill up the shoe department for JCPenney. So there's a lot of reason to keep some of these companies afloat. And that's a mall that already lost a Nordstrom. So...
Well, and that's it brings kind of to the next question with the malls, and you can kind of bring malls into this discussion because we saw a big shift towards that experiential retail. We were celebrating this in our community, whether it was a mall or a venue that built a movie theater. There was all this push to gather, and now there's been a really big pause, and that pause could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. We don't know if it's going to be a year. Where do you see that going, number one? And number two, do you think it's going to be enough to put some of these concepts that actually are viable and solvent without even giving them a chance?
So lesser malls are going to close. There is the mall you think of as the bad mall in town. That doesn't need to be there. Like, and that's a good thing. Some of your struggling retailers like GameStop, one of their big issues is they have too many stores. There's like 5 of them that I could drive to in under 10 minutes. That is way more for stores that sell something I could download. You know, so when a mall closes, they can't charge you rent anymore. I would assume that's how it works. I'm not in realty, but I would assume when the mall closes, if a store was still there, they get out of their lease. Though some of those stores are either stores that need to close anyway, or, you know, that bad mall I keep referencing here is actually in Boynton Beach, Florida. It has a Buca de Beppo. Well, that's a popular restaurant. That restaurant appears to be not right now, but before this be doing well. That might move to a strip mall, to a different location. So that should elevate real estate. Boynton Beach is a heavy on 55 plus. It would not shock me if that mall site became a residential community, because it's a very heavily stored area. But the actual malls are going to have to be clever. They're going to have to hire people as a chain and on the local level to figure out experiences. Right now, that might mean using your parking lot as a drive-in movie theater to show Mulan in a few weeks if they actually follow through with that release. It might mean doing things like socially distant food truck events, and maybe with your internal restaurants, renting spaces and food trucks and tents and whatever it is. When we return to normal, it might be having spaces in the mall that are just always interesting. I was in a mall in Houston, Texas, and they had a store that was devoted to like Kickstarter projects. And it was like all cool high-tech stuff that I'd never seen anywhere, and you could buy it. I'd like to see malls, take a store and devote it to local vendors. We're seeing that here in downtown West Palm Beach. The city raised some money, and again, delayed because of the pandemic, but they let local businesses put in proposals, and 12 businesses are going to go in. They're not paying rent for the first 2 months. Then it escalates up. And then after a year, they evaluate the business and say, is this a viable business that can pay rent and go forward? Do we need to keep giving you a supplement, but that can eventually get there? And you're going to get, like, one of the places that's going in there is a vegan cheesesteak restaurant. Do I think there's a demand for vegan cheesesteak? Absolutely not. But prove me wrong. I would love to hope that the people who want that this is serving a need. There's also going to be a bubble tea shop in there. I love bubble tea. Do I think that's a business that's going to survive? No. I think that's a very limited demand business. But trying all these things, figuring out which ones work, and if it works, maybe you try it at 2 other malls. Maybe things like right now, we can't get our picture taken with the Easter Bunny. That is not, though I feel like the Easter Bunny's safe. He's wearing a whole costume, but you're not supposed to do that. I know because Disney's not doing character meet and greets when they reopen. Figuring out fun things to do like that for the now, where maybe we have to have some weird socially distanced photo with the Easter Bunny, and for whatever time period it is when we have normal. And look, we're going to have normal. We talked about this a little bit before. Americans have largely decided, at least here in the South, that they're just going to go do what they want. And is that great? It is absolutely not great. But eventually, with a lot of horror happening because of that, that is going to lead to us being able to go back to the mall without a mask and in normal situations. And I am not someone who says, oh, all the malls are going to close. We're all going to buy on our phone. I would think, and this is just a guess, 2019, this is a fact, 11.4% of all retail sales were digital. Right now, obviously, an awful lot more. But I think the new number, let's pretend in November we all had a vaccine and Christmas shopping could be normal. I think it's only going to be 15, 17%, somewhere in that range. People still like going to Costco. Like, I don't go to the mall because I need something. I go to the mall because my son wants a Cinnabon and I want to walk around some stores, maybe sit in a massage chair for 5 minutes, and maybe buy something, maybe not. I don't think shopping as experience is going to change. Like, we have an outlet mall, Simon Outlet Mall down the street from me. We probably go there 3 times a month and only buy something, every other time. I don't think that goes away. It's just largely on pause at the moment.
So do you think that the consumer demand is going to continue through that? I mean, we're going to see GDP, of course, drop, and a lot of these retailers, you said this on our pre-call, I mean, we might have too much in some places or too many stores on some levels. So where do you see that coming back? And I want to also kind of focus on, with this disruption, are there some really viable concepts that aren't going to be able to make it through just because there is so much disruption, number one? And number two, what about the people who work there? Can you speak a little bit to the retailers that might not be able to have their folks come back for health reasons or for monetary reasons?
Yeah, so I don't want to sound cavalier because a lot of people are going to lose their job. Right now, demand is being fueled by the federal unemployment backstop. The vast majority of people who are out of work, and I apologize if you're someone who this does not apply to, I myself am a contract worker who would likely, if I wasn't working, not be eligible for unemployment, and would have to go through other, so I fully understand that there are exceptions. I'm not trying to be cavalier. But the person who worked at Macys when, let's say 85% of the Macys workforce ends up being what's needed. Walmart and Target have hired 200,000 extra people. some of those people are going to go back to their jobs, in the service industry as those industries come back. There were 6 million job openings. I actually had the chief economist for Glassdoor on my show last night at 4 o'clock Eastern. And he talked about how their job listings are down 70%, but a lot of those is the mechanics of hiring. It's not necessarily, you're not going to bring in a new senior vice president of finance who you only spoke to on a Zoom meeting, and that person's not going to take the job without getting to spend some time with you and going through. I am a strong optimist and believer in a strong recovery, because right now most people have not taken an income hit. In fact, some people that were paying for childcare are they're not working, but they're getting slightly more money because of the $600 bonus. Not always true here in Florida, where unemployment is the lowest in the nation, not in terms of numbers, in terms of payout, what you get per week. I think at Macys at $275. So even with that $600, some people are still not whole. But I know people who were struggling that had $1,000 in childcare they didn't have to spend. They had, $10,000 in summer camps. That could be 1 kid, that could be 3 kids, depends what camp you go to, that they're not spending. I think there's a lot. That's why you can't buy a basketball hoop right now, because there were a lot of people who said, my kid can't go to camp. You cannot buy an outdoor pool. That doesn't exist. Like, it is impossible, basically. There is a lot of consumer demand. What's going to not come back? Movie theaters aren't going to come back. Now, will there be movie theaters? Absolutely. We have too many screens. We need theaters to show the Avengers on. We need theaters to show Fast and the Furious 12 or whatever it is. I'm not so sure that we haven't all realized that watching the latest nuanced crime drama or silly romantic comedy isn't a better experience on our couch with much cheaper popcorn. So I think we're going to see a change in the federal rules about distributors being allowed. Movie studios can't own movie theaters. The logical people to own movie theaters are Netflix and Disney, and maybe they'll have to be managed in some third-party way. But Disney, if they can cut out the middleman of paying, somewhere between 30 and 50% of opening week gross, and the number moves in favor of the theater as you go along. And Disney negotiates better terms than that because they have Star Wars and other things people really want to see. Taking that chunk out could actually make it so you don't have to charge $6 for a thing of Junior Mints, and you can make movies a better experience. But do we need 18 theaters? And as commercial real estate people, I say this is a big problem, because it's not easy. If a Kohls goes out, you can turn that into a co-work or a trampoline place or whatever it is, just pretty easily. It is not all that easy to turn theaters into stuff. I think we are going to figure out more uses. Like, you can go here in Florida and watch Red Sox games at the movie theater down the street from me, because obviously there's a big Boston audience. UFC fights are sometimes shown there. You're going to see more of that. But if I was a realtor, I would literally be out there talking to people with clever ideas and figuring out like what the next things are. I think we all thought that event-based stuff like going to a Dave & Buster's would be really good for a mall. And it's turned out that Dave & Buster's is busy Friday night, Saturday night, sometimes Saturday during the day, Sunday during football season. Otherwise, it's a really struggling, difficult business. But some products like The Void, which is virtual reality, there's one in Disney Springs, there's one in Las Vegas, is amazingly expensive. It takes a very small amount of space, and it's something people would do for a birthday party with 3 or 4 kids, and it's like $45, and it's amazing. And it could go in like basically a small mall store, because it's virtual reality. You feel like you're in this giant world, but you're in like 145 square foot space that they've used very cleverly. I would be looking at everything like that works. Every independent venue, like my old toy store. Why are people coming to this? Well, he's got a 12,000 square foot train that runs on Sundays that's free to come look at. You can talk to the people who built it. You can join the club and start building it. A lot more stuff like that has to start coming to our malls, to our shopping centers. Co-working. It amazes me that it took Staples and Office Depot like 5 years too long to go, wait a minute, we have these stores that sell office supplies. They're all in pretty good locations. I'm not sure here in West Palm I'd go to an Office Depot in a strip mall as opposed to a downtown or, a cool place like I'm in. But in a New York City where a WeWork or that is really expensive, Staples has the real estate. Why didn't they? They're doing it now in a tiny bit. That level of clever And as realtors, I'd be making those connections. I'd be, flying out to go see the interesting coffee vendor that's doing kiosks that you can order on your phone that they have that would fill a great space in a mall where the Starbucks always has a really long line at the mall. Why they don't just open another one, I've never understood. But figure out what's working and then go find those people and make deals where they can come in for 6 months for free. See who's on TV doing a cool restaurant concept. See if they want to open up an outpost. The leads aren't going to come to you anymore. I think for the most part, you have to go out and make things happen. You have to talk to the builders and say, geesh, wouldn't it be nice if there was a hotel right next to this mall that has all these restaurants, that has Uber pickup and all these things? You're starting to see it. Here in West Palm, we've had 3 hotels open during the pandemic. That's a bad time to open. But we were an area that is not a tourist destination because during the times it's most desirable to come here, we fill up with people who are here every year and are willing to pay way high prices. So the Marriott that I live next to is $600 a night in December. It's $79 a night now. You need more hotels. Being really proactive and figuring that stuff out is the really interesting puzzle that all of you get to solve.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of the virtual reality, whether it's trying something before you buy it. We see, Peloton stores, so you can try it. You can't actually buy it there. You mentioned Warby Parker, Untuckit. These are really small concepts. Can you talk about what that might do for real estate values, and then also maybe tie that into urban versus suburban demand going forward?
Sure. So one of the interesting facts, and I wrote a story on it before we'd even thought of the pandemic, is if I had asked you, will more stores close in 2020 than open? 99 people out of 100 would have told me more stores will close. The actual answer is more stores are going to open across every category. But you just mentioned it. The problem is Warby Parker is like an 1,100 square foot store. It's basically like where they sell this shirt at JCPenney's is the entire size. So as a retailer, as a mall owner, in some cases, you need to be getting rid of space. So that might mean, yep, the Gap can become 3 of those stores. The Gap could become Warby Parker, Untuckit, and Third Love. And Casper Mattress could go in where the gelato place nobody'd ever heard of failed. And you could fill in your stores that way. Cosmetical. There's going to be an enormous amount of growth. I've seen it here in Florida, which I actually think would probably be the first place you'd try it because of, LA maybe would be a better choice. But you're going to see stores with Botox, with melt your fat. I think you are going to see, more service businesses, the places that do your eyebrows, and I'm not even sure what they're doing there. The men's place that shaves you and charges you $40 and it really hurts. Don't do that. I'm not a big fan. This is one. The urban market is difficult because your rents are so high. It's something I see here in West Palm Beach, which is not an overly expensive market, where a restaurant will go out and I'll see the business listing and the place that was like maybe pretty successful, the rent will be $12,000 a month. And I'm just doing the math. I'm like, how many pizzas am I going to have to sell to, just to pay the rent? And I think that is a challenge when space is more valuable for people to live in, but then nobody wants to live there because there isn't a pizza place and a grocery store. Target's done a really good job figuring that out. The small format Target stores are really interesting and really well done, and they're built around grab and go. So you're not going to go into like the New York City Target store. You can order a 70-inch TV, but you're not going to leave with one. So it's one of those scenarios where, sorry, I hope you don't see that. I'm getting a phone call, apparently. It just popped up on screen. So it's one of those scenarios where, you're going to have to be very, very clever. And as a real estate developer, one of the things they do here when they build buildings in West Palm Beach is there's always retail space as part of the new buildings because they know that eventually that building's going to fill and it will probably support another Starbucks or a coffee place or whatever it happens to be. That hasn't proven to be true yet, but I think in the long term it will be. A buddy of mine owns a brewery, a really nice restaurant brewery, really fun place in downtown West Palm Beach. It's not his prime business. It's been closed during most of this, just reopened. And he was doing pretty good business during the football season. And I said to him, oh, you're sitting on a gold mine. And he said, what do you mean? I said, that building right next to you opens in a month. I said, just be their room service. Like, just hand out your menu on every door and hire a 15-year-old to just deliver. And he'll probably do that. You have to be clever. Like, it's the one thing I learned running an independent store. You have to do things that you would never consider, and some of them will fail. I will give you an example of a success. We held a barbecue for our customers, and people came down, they ate our food, they bought a lot of stuff. We cleaned out the warehouse, and that was absolutely awesome. A negative is we got rented a cotton candy machine. And as people walked into our store, we handed them cotton candy. And I was cleaning for the next 3 months because cotton candy is really sticky. But you have to try different ideas. You have to do different things to, to change up the game.
So speaking of changing up the game, and maybe this is what's pushing a lot of companies to change the game, can you talk a little bit more about Amazon? For many years, the first, 10 years, they weren't turning a profit, but now we've got a scenario where most of us, our whole paycheck goes to Amazon, but their economics are flawed. Are they sustainable? What's going to happen there, and what kind of innovation outside possibly a storefront or additional food venues might we see from that? And how might you see other retailers reacting?
Amazon is incredibly profitable. It's worth pointing out that Amazon got their stock dropped a little bit when they reported last time, because they said we're going to take all our profits and we're going to plow them into COVID-19 response. That's not just their response, that's also figuring it out for other people. So Amazon is very sustainable. AWS, their web business is driving those profits, but on a retail basis, they're doing just fine. And they're going to keep experimenting. They're going to look, I think it's possible Amazon buys Kohls. I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think when you partner with a company, you're kicking the tires a little bit. That said, I always used to say, oh, Amazon's going to buy Radio Shack. That's so obvious. They could have this amazing portfolio of 8,000 stores that's everywhere. They didn't do that. But are they going to test different restaurants, different partnerships? I don't know why they paused the Whole Foods 365 experiment, which was really interesting. That was sort of less fancy Whole Foods that also would have like usually a local establishment restaurant integrated to it, aimed at a younger, more urban audience. So one of those scenarios where Amazon's going to throw a lot at the wall. They have like 6 different concepts. They have the Amazon Go convenience store. They have the 4-star store, which only sells 4-star items. I always wondered what if the rating goes down, do they pull it out immediately? They have the bookstore. It's a fabulous bookstore because it's a bookstore where they could know the person who buys this book is really likely to buy this pan. So I'm going to put the pan and the book next to each other, 10% off. Amazon knows what you're going to buy before you buy it. Meaning if I'm going to buy some tea bags and some new razor blades on Amazon, their algorithm has them packing that at the facility down the street, not because they know I'm going to order it. They just have enough data to know someone's going to order that ridiculous combination and have it ready. They're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter, and other companies have to follow that lead. You saw how Walmart had to buy Jet.com. They had to spend $3.3 billion to basically hire one smart guy in his team. And then Mark Lowry had to fight and basically sacrifice his brand and everything to get them to make that digital transformation. Those fights need to happen more places. Things like virtual reality. I have no idea when someone is going to figure out how to measure me for custom-made pants. I've tried that. I won't mention the company because the pants showed up and I looked like Apu from The Simpsons. The waist was here, the material was really cheap, and they were $90. Which is way more than I would spend on jeans. In most cases, someone's going to figure that out absolutely perfectly. Where is the store at the mall? And this is more a women thing than a men thing, where you can go in, pick the style bathing suit you want and get measured for it via a non-invasive, some sort of laser thing where you just get in a booth and you don't have to take your clothes off. It doesn't store your picture. It doesn't do anything. And you get a bathing suit that fits perfectly, or, a wedding dress or whatever else it might be. Those types of things are where the Macys of the world should be looking. And I've totally lost track of what question I was answering here. But, seeing that kind of innovation, that's where I think the survival is going to be for some of these companies.
So you spoke of innovation. I want to go to an industry that it maybe hasn't always been so innovative, but has been interesting, at least in our market, as we look at them introducing a new concept, and that is Ikea. Ikea built its first store here in Oak Creek several years ago. Traditionally, there had been a barrier because of size needs and traditional size considerations, but they shrunk the size for the store, and now it just seems that they can be very flexible, or any retailer can be flexible. Can you speak to a retailer like IKEA or other furniture retailers, maybe even bringing in Wayfair? What's the future for that? And how are some of these more, there's a lot of product there. How are these companies thinking about real estate?
So IKEA is going to open 140 malls, largely in cities, which is I believe them. They say they're going to do it, and they've done some in Europe. Obviously, IKEA has to be flexible about its warehouse model, but IKEAs tend to be located on the fringe of a city. Like they can go to the less expensive real estate. I think a closed mall is a very good location where an IKEA could get the space it needs and be in the heart of a population. I think that's a positive. IKEA is shopping as a destination. You might go to IKEA because you need a new whatever. You might also go to IKEA because it's fun. You walk around IKEA, you take pictures of yourself in different kitchens. Your kid makes the same joke about using the toilet. Like, there's every manner of fun, and that's Costco too. Sometimes you go to Costco because you need a 40-pound bag of meatballs, but sometimes you go to see if they have the 8-foot teddy bear or if kayaks are on sale, even though you don't live near a body of water. Costco is a store you're really likely to come out with something that you get home later and go, oh, what did I do? Like, why did I buy a kayak? I don't want to do that. Why did I buy a coffin? Like, I'm healthy. That, I think, doubling down on giving you a reason to go to the store is going to be something that we see more of. And IKEA has really done that. People like their food court. They like going to get that. There's a lot of opportunity for them. Wayfair is one I feel less confident about. They have had really good metrics because we're all stuck at home and we had to buy office furniture. And in some cases, well, if your bed breaks during a pandemic, you have to buy a new bed. I know as someone who's a Wayfair customer, I bought a pantry from Wayfair. It wasn't quite as nice as I thought it would be. My contractor, when he put it together for me, had to sort of like bolster the back because it was like such a cheap back. But that said, it's fine. If I bought a couch on Wayfair that I never sat on, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't do that. And I think a lot of people are going to be like that. So I am a little bit wary of this model of like furniture sales where we don't touch the furniture. I think that's why we're seeing like a Lovesac open stores. And you can't buy anything in their stores, but you can sit in the damn sofa. And I think that's important. That is something where I think you might see some, let's call it trends or seasonality. The example I always give is the same out of business Circuit City always became the Halloween store. And I said to the people who were running the Halloween store, back when I was running a toy store, I said, after Halloween, why don't you become a Christmas store? And then after that, why don't you become a Valentine's Day store? It really feels like you're going through all the effort of hiring a staff, setting up supply chains, and doing all of this for like 1 month of selling one item, where it would really take like 12 hours of decorating to completely pivot to be the next thing. And I was saying this because as the toy store, I really wanted to open up satellite locations for a month a year, because we used to joke, but like come like December 23rd, if you own a toy store, you can sell bags of leaves because people are just desperate. We tried not to do that, but every year we would sell the Howdy Doody doll my boss had bought because he remembered Howdy Doody. And I would tell him every time, oh, that's coming back. Like no kid is going to want that. And that's what would happen. Every year it would come back. But that is sort of the where you're going to see it go, the optionality of it, where you might see a mall have a space that becomes different things at different times based on what the needs are. You sell a lot more ice cream in Wisconsin, I would guess, in the summer than you do in the winter. I always wondered when I lived in the Northeast, how come, say, Ben & Jerry's or any of these chains that had real estate, why didn't they sell like pudding or mousse or something that wasn't cold when it's really, really cold out? That is going to take realtors, real estate agents, commercial real estate agents, figuring out what those demands are, what the needs are, what the next clever thing is, and being very proactive about it.
So you kind of alluded to this before, but are you seeing then some of the brands going off then and just going straight direct to consumer? It sounds like rather than through the...
Yeah, that would concern me. So Nike is doing that, but Nike's doing that largely to cut out Amazon. They're not doing that. They still want to have a great relationship with Foot Locker, but they want to be able to say, okay, the guy who's going to spend $500 on a limited edition pair of sneakers that we were causing like riots by releasing in stores. Let's just have a one-on-one relationship with him. The runner who needs, new socks on almost like a subscription basis, they're going to have that. But what Nike is also doing is they're using their inventory to use their stores to sell things to you efficiently. So there's still going to be a place. Like, I am surprised that every mall doesn't have a business that does shipping, because most small mall retailers, they're not good at fulfillment. I was in a Foot Locker. They didn't have the size shoes my son wanted after much fighting over how much money he was allowed to spend on shoes, because while his feet are still growing, I have a budget that I'm capping that at. They had them on the website, but they were more money. And I said, can you do something? Like, can you match this? And they said, no. Like, there's nothing we could do there. Like, we don't have his size here. We have it on the website. We can't order it for you and sell it to you at this. Nike, that would not be a problem. I could walk up to a person and they'd say, oh yeah, we'll have that here tomorrow. Or do you want it sent to your house? That's what omnichannel is. That's what sort of being clever is. And I think we're going to see a ton more of that from the good companies. And they're not all good companies.
Well, we're a little over, but if you'll indulge us for just a few more minutes, I have a few more questions.
Absolutely.
So you follow a lot of the stock guidance. That's one of the things you're definitely known for. Can you talk about how some of these publicly traded, whether they're retailers or REITs or properties, are handling guidance, and when they're looking at coming out of this, and maybe call out some of the names, if you will?
So almost everybody has pulled their guidance. There are some encouraging signs. The news from Simon Property Group, which is a REIT, has been pretty strong. 70-80% of tenants paying their rent. Malls are open. People are starting to come back. The early trends have been good. Best Buy has said volume has come back pretty quickly. They're actually opening about 800 stores. They were working on an appointment basis. Now they're actually going to fully open with restrictions and limited capacities. Obviously, the retailers who did well from this, most of them are in great shape. Target, Home Depot, Costco, Lowe's. The only one I'm really wary of is Kroger. Kroger wasn't doing so great before this, and they did really well because we needed food, we needed supplies. So they have to spend the money they made on this in transforming a little bit, because their competition is Amazon, Target, and Walmart. They don't need to make a lot of money on groceries for them to be selling you groceries. That puts Kroger in a really tough position where they're fighting with the big boys. I would worry about any of those smaller grocery chains, especially as Amazon opens physical stores and Walmart really figures out how to automate grocery picking. That technology all exists. They just don't use it that much. If you possibly could, and I know it's hard when people are invested, if you're pretty sure a company's going to make it, just don't look at their quarterly earnings for the next 2 months. I don't care if Starbucks is 80% back or 90% back, because a year from now, Starbucks will be fine. Now, I'm a little curious as to know why Chipotle is not doing better. Like, it feels to me like they were a little bit behind the 8 ball. They don't have drive-throughs in many locations. They have an app. They have a second line in almost every store that was supposed to be for digital orders. They didn't do a great job communicating, but just simply not having a drive-through and not having really strong, delivery methods. They were Postmates partners. I think now they're everywhere, but even getting that stuff up to speed is a challenge. So, look, if it's Dillard's, I'd be really careful, because they might go out of business. Obviously your Sears and your J.C. Penney's, which have had bankruptcies or are currently in bankruptcy, it's hard to know what's going to happen. But your strong retailers, the ones who are even just doing okay before this, if they can get through, we don't know if it's going to be sort of normal in the next few months and people are just going to buy stuff. There might also be like a wave of buying. Oh my God, I need a haircut and new pants, and my laptop's, the space bar. I actually had that nightmare. And the first day of like everybody at home, the space bar in my laptop started sticking. And I have 2 laptops, but the one I sit with on the couch and use, and thankfully some of my colleagues had suggestions, and it took me 4 days. I had to order air, and like to hit the space bar, I had to hit it really hard. And I was like, how am I going to work like this for this long? Because this computer I'm using here is too big to sit on my lap. Sounds like a little problem, but we're going to solve all those problems. A lot of people aren't going on vacation. They're going to go to the mall. That's obviously bad here in South Florida, where we need people to come on vacation. Miami, the malls in Miami are not built for locals. They are built for tourists. But that said, slowly things are going to come back. I believe out there you guys have indoor water parks. People are going to go to those. They might pay more to go to those with limited capacities. We're seeing it here as we reopen the theme parks. People are willing to put up with an awful lot to feel sort of normal, and that's encouraging to me.
So one final question, and then I want to get to our kind of capstone question, but this came in about the big box stores. And if you're seeing any sort of replacements for those, whether they're, the outlots, or if there's one too many Home Depots, are you seeing any clustering there or any broad solution?
So I'm not overly worried about too many Home Depots, but there's absolutely going to be some mall anchors lost, and even successful. Even if Macys turns out to be successful, they have some stores that just don't make sense. JCPenney's closing 120 stores no matter how they come out of bankruptcy. The logical tenants for those could be anything. Could be a hotel, gyms. It always made sense to me to put a gym someplace with a big parking lot that might also have other things you need. Co-working spaces, if they can get favorable deals. Event space. You might see supermarkets, which you traditionally haven't seen supermarkets at malls, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if you have a huge plot of land and you can get a Wegmans or something that's a destination. You're going to have to be clever. There might be a need, like maybe your shuttered, standalone Macys, and there are some of those. Maybe that's going to become an athletics complex with a bubble where on Saturdays people are flying their RC planes and on Sunday nights they're playing indoor soccer. People are going to want to do stuff. They're going to want to spend money. We just don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So, businesses that seem like a good idea, Topgolf seems like a great business, but it takes up a huge amount of space. It's a really expensive piece of real estate. And you have to have enough people willing to pay the money enough hours of the day. I don't know if that business is, we just got a Drive Shack, which is the same business here, opened right before all of this. They're open now because they're individual cubicles. It's well set up for social distancing. Is there going to be enough of an audience to pay what has to be an astronomical sum of rent, on a piece of land that can, fit a driving range that's in a city? Like it's in the edge of downtown West Palm Beach.
So are these social distancing measures, do you think, going to be permanent in some of these places? No, you think this is going to just snap back and
I think I'm pretty confident we're going to have a vaccine, and I'm not a doctor, but I've done a lot of shows with our resident PhD, and there's weird, unprecedented things happening, like they're making vaccines that we don't know work yet. That could happen. Successful treatments are much more likely to happen if you look at historical, how we've dealt with things. Herd immunity is eventually something that's going to happen, where this could become like a seasonal flu, where it comes in and it comes out. And owning a mask and maybe having to use one during flu season when you live in an elderly population, as I do, most of my building is pretty old, that might become something that's more a part of the American experience. But anybody that writes that article, we will never high five again, no one's ever going to hug, the office is totally different. I work remotely and spend my own money to fly and visit our office. There is nothing more valuable than FaceTime. You are going to see companies say, hey, you have the sniffles, you can come in via Zoom. You don't have to come in. Oh, your kid's got a thing at school, work from home today. I think there's going to be a lot more understanding that working from home still means working. But all these companies that are posturing and saying, oh, you never have to come back to work, you're going to realize pretty quickly that it's hard to build culture that way. It's also hard to get promoted if you work remotely. And part of the reason I go to our office regularly is to just meet people, to have FaceTime, to make a connection. And because of that, our public relations person knows me, and I'm doing this. Our head of our video unit is somebody that I have coffee with when I visit. And when he got that job, he said, hey, you want to do a tryout and do some video? And he did the same thing when he ran our Asian sites. So I think a lot of this, like, we're never going to have offices. One of the byproducts of companies taking less office space is going to be more people needing a co-work and deciding, like, you know what, it's not that fun to work on my couch. I want to be around other people. I want there to be a coffee machine. I want there to be a bathroom that I don't have to clean. I want my cats to not be interrupting my meeting. So we're going to see a shift. And there's going to be some fallout. There's 5 or 6 restaurants near the office building that the Motley Fool is in. If a quarter of our workforce decides to more flexibly work from home, and we've always had pretty liberal terms, but some teams were less liberal than others. If that becomes everyone only goes in 3 days a week when the pandemic is over, well, that might not be great for the Potbelly sandwiches or the Panera that's down the road, but maybe that Panera expands its delivery by a mile into the residential neighborhood that's not that far from the office. You have to start thinking about that, and working with your clients on, what's the current normal, where are we going to be when this is a little bit more lax, but still a little buttoned up for at least those of us who are being sensible, and what are we going to do when there are actual changes? Like, I don't believe that like people are going to flee the city. They all want country homes. Or it was the head of Redfin, I think, or Zillow, one of them, who said, oh, so many more people are going to buy vacation homes, as if coming out of a pandemic where a lot of people were like very nervous about money. Yeah, that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're going to buy a sprawling estate in the Hamptons. That's just not how I see it going. But I do think you're going to have to watch really closely to what happens in your area, and you might see some people want to live different places. I know my wife and I intentionally lived downtown in a 1,300 square foot condo because I wanted to be able to walk to the movies, walk to restaurants, and have the city pretty close by. During this pandemic, we've given a lot of thought to, what would be nice to have? Our own pool and a garage where I could put some workout equipment, because our gym was closed in our building, for much of this. We're probably not going to do it until my son graduates from high school in a couple of years, but I don't think I'll be able to talk my wife out of wanting more space to be away from me in the house. Those are the kind of changes we have to look at, but we're not going to get like, most people who live in New York knew how difficult it was to live in New York before this, and they're not going to, flee to New Jersey just because this has happened.
Final question, Daniel. 5 years from now, where are we?
5 years from now, the world looks a little bit different, but also the same. Is the mall still there? Absolutely, but there's probably a condo tower or a hotel as part of the mall. More of the stores are experimental. As some people asked in the questions about, a virtual reality. Yeah, I think there's going to be more ability to do what they do on like those like home improvement shows, where you walk into the store that sells couches with a picture, and Peloton can do this actually, and they show you, okay, that's what the couch is going to look like in your house. And you know what would look great with that? This end table. And that, I think there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be maybe less physical merchandise in the stores, because I'm not sure it makes sense for every store to carry every size. I will say I am a fairly weird size. I'm not that tall, and they assume if your waist is a certain size, you're going to be a certain level of height. So it is difficult to buy pants off the rack. I know that, so it would be nice if you could easily go in, get virtually measured, and then just order the size you need. It's not cost effective for every store to stock every item. So I think we might move in really the opposite direction, where very little is in stock, but you're getting things same day, next day delivery. I very rarely feel like I have to have it now. For the most part, I am willing to wait. I think you're going to see experiences at a mall or in shopping that you don't see now. Like there's a lending library in one of our malls now. That's a weird business, but things like that. I've never understood why malls don't have drop-off daycare. I think that's something you're gonna see more of, and stuff is gonna happen. A lot of things are gonna try and fail. I go back to, there used to be a chain called the Great American Back Rub. It was, you could sit down for 20 minutes and they gave you, a back rub and a chair. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Like everyone will love this. Nobody loved that. A lot of stuff is not going to work. Build-A-Bear seems like a great business, and it is for like 4 hours a week. The rest of the week, it is a really tough business. Stores becoming different things. Chuck E. Cheese is a company that's in real trouble. And I have joked for years, at night, why don't they pull out better video games and a nicer menu and become Charles E. Cheese and become like a bar for like 20-somethings? And that's a bit preposterous, but I think more businesses are going to have to look at, like, you can't just have like a lunch menu and a dinner menu. Maybe you're literally a different concept after certain hours. Maybe your delivery offer, and we're seeing this now, where a lot of restaurants are doing family meals, and Morton's, if you order their food, they'll bring you raw steaks if you want to cook them at home. So I know on Mother's Day, we ordered from Morton's, and I got hamburgers, raw hamburgers that I made the next night, which were fabulous because they came from Morton's. I think you're going to see more of that. Some things that I think are here to stay. I don't think you can roll back delivering of cocktails. I think that's going to be a thing now. And that type of stuff is where we're going to be in 5 years. Much more innovation. Like maybe restaurants will figure out a way to deliver you fries where you don't have to then reheat them in the toaster because they're soggy. I joke about that, but there are real problems that we should be working on solving. And some of that is, sizing in stores. Some of that is, hey, I don't want to buy a patio set just from a catalog. I want to actually see it. What's the virtual reality way to do that? Do I put on a headset? Headsets aren't that comfortable yet. 2 years from now, they probably will be. So a lot of that, your doctor's office, there might be a Minute Clinic in your mall. Not a great place to walk through if you don't feel well, but there's ways around that with exterior entrances. This is a time to be clever. It's a time of reinvention, but I also don't think we're going to see this like massive collapse that, I said it at the beginning, the term retail apocalypse is a lie. It's bad businesses that went out of business because they made bad decisions for decades, or they took on a ton of debt in a leveraged buyout. And that only works if sales keep going up. You're seeing it now across a lot of companies that they borrowed really heavily. And it's not just retail companies. Like you're seeing it with like a UFC. Part of the reason they had to come back so quickly is they owe banks a lot of money and they don't get paid by ESPN if they don't air. So we're going to go back to arenas. We just don't know when. Concerts will happen. We just don't know when. Right now, if I was a mall, I'd be putting on in-car concerts in my parking lot. There's a lot of great artists that are available cheap right now. I hate to be an optimist in such a bad time, but I'm excited for this forcing smart people to think and to not just let the old system slowly die and then make a change, but to recognize like, oh, this is dying a little faster. Let's do something different.
Well, Daniel, we certainly appreciate your optimism. You're definitely bullish on what the things to come. I think we have a ton of great ideas that have come from this. So thank you everyone for being here. Again, thank you, Daniel, the Motley Fool. We'll share this recording and the recap in a few days. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for having me.